Starting with West Asia, Iran and Israel have halted attacks on each other after the two countries exchanged fire for the first time since April's truce.
And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that Israel was temporarily holding fire hours after Tehran said it had ceased its military operations.
Tehran launched missiles at Israel on Sunday, saying the attack was in retaliation for an Israeli strike on Beirut. Israel struck back, triggering another round of Iranian missiles before Tehran announced that it would cease fire.
Netanyahu reportedly called off further strikes on Iran despite fighter jets being ready on the runway after a warning from U.S. President Donald Trump.
Now, according to Axios, Trump cautioned Netanyahu against escalating the war and suggested Israel could find itself isolated without U.S. backing it if it proceeded with major retaliatory attacks. He told Netanyahu, and I quote here, "Bibi, you better be careful or you will be on your own very soon," quote unquote, Donald Trump.
Well, Tehran has said it would attack again if Israel continues strikes in Lebanon, while Netanyahu has warned that Israel would respond with full force if Iran resumes attacks.
Well, the Israeli Prime Minister in a televised address said that he has told Donald Trump that Israel has a full right to self-defense.
Israel has the full right to self-defense, and we exercise it whenever necessary. I say this to you, dear citizens of Israel, just as I say it with appreciation and respect in my good conversations with my friend, President Trump.
According to Lebanon's health ministry, violence continued in southern Lebanon, with an Israeli strike killing 5 people in the city of Tyre. Another strike in the Nabathi district left 7 dead, while a third attack in Marwaniyeh killed 2 people.
The Israeli military said that it had detected projectiles launched towards its troops operating in southern Lebanon. It said that some were intercepted while one landed near soldiers without causing any casualties. The military later reported intercepting a suspicious aerial target launched from Yemen, adding that no injuries were reported there either. All right, to discuss more on this, we're now being joined by Colonel Rich Outzen, a former military and a civilian advisor at U.S. Department of State and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Colonel Outzen, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for joining us here again. Let's start right off, sir. Israel has the right to self-defense. They've made it clear. Iran vows harsher strikes on Israel if it hits Lebanon, while Hezbollah and the Houthis are continuing their strikes towards Israel. This is an escalation loop. What's the off-ramp?
Well, I think both sides, in this case, both Israel and the Iranians, are really trying to get inside the mind of President Donald Trump. Because at a certain point, Donald Trump is going to either offer concessions to Iran in order to get some sort of an agreement and an off-ramp, or he's going to press much harder, which is what the Israelis want him to do. So I think what we're seeing here is sort of a game of chicken, where Iran has proven that it can continue to absorb blows and punishments. It's dispersed. It's in command and control. There is no easy victory to just knock over the Iranians. And at the same time, Israel's playing with some time limitations as well. Their political pressure in the United States and sentiment is not as entirely pro-Israel as it has been. I think both of these countries are playing a game of chicken here by sort of pressing on one another and hitting as much as they can, knowing that Trump wants an agreement. He wants this to end. So who will, at the end, be able to convince Trump that he should come down on their side and put pressure on the other to stop? I think that's what we're observing here now.
In that case, how do you observe the condition that Iran has put forward, saying that it's one of the condition is stopping the attacks in Lebanon, while Israel says they're not going to stop, they're going to continue going in and attacking? Where do you think U.S. will play a role here? Because Israel is not willing to stop there. Iran is not willing to go to a peace talks without this happening from Israel's side.
Yeah, you've hit on a very important point. That's at the heart of the negotiating strategy, right, for both sides. For Iran, it's important for them to maintain proxy control over Hamas in the Gaza Strip if they can, and over Hezbollah in Lebanon. These are groups that they've supported for a long time. So to the extent that they can wrap them into the conflict and say, look, Trump needs to have an end to the fighting in the Gulf because of oil and gas prices. And if we can tie that to the fighting in Lebanon, then we can protect Lebanese Hezbollah. So Israel, on the other hand, says these are separate things. And we understand we've taken care of, at least for the next several years, the Iranian nuclear program. The U.S. wants peace in the Gulf because of the oil prices and the Straits of Hormuz. But we still have to be concerned about Hezbollah and Lebanon. So that's the dividing point. And the Iranians want to tie the two together. The Iranians very much want Trump to have peace or to push for peace deal in both the Gulf and in Lebanon. That would serve their interests in terms of maintaining a proxy network. Israelis, on the other hand, say these should be separate. We should be allowed to defend ourselves on the Lebanese border, regardless of what's going on in the Gulf. So we'll see who wins in that battle, both for Trump's mind and the battle for pressure, economic and military, on both fronts.
Colonel, do you foresee a situation where Israel find itself on its own in this entire West Asia quagmire?
Well, look, I spent 4 years in Israel in the U.S. government, and I have a lot of sympathy for Israel. I'm a fan of Israel, and a lot of Americans are. But I have to say that this current war is testing the general bipartisan American support for Israel, because what's emerging both on the left and on the right is a view that Israel sort of sold a bill of goods to President Trump. They indicated that this would be like Venezuela. You'd go in, you'd make a quick military strike, you'd get some concessions and a more pliable government. That didn't turn out. So that's sort of an error in judgment. But then the other issue, now we've seen this come out with reports over the weekend coming in today that Israelis are now spying on the negotiating teams from the United States. This harkens back to some less pleasant times in U.S.-Israel relations. Like, it's always going to be the case that the U.S. wants a healthy and strong Israel. We support Israel, we do. But there's been ups and downs in this relationship. I would say that the course of the war in Iran, and especially these spying allegations, haven't been the best moment. So I think it's not conceivable that Israel will find itself alone. But it is conceivable that Israel will face a U.S. president and bipartisan consensus that says, stop. This is enough, and this is not the war. This is not the right time. Kind of putting a little bit more pressure on them to conclude things on terms other than what Bibi Netanyahu seems to want.
That's on Israel. How about Iran? Because, of course, we had Trump who said that there's about 20% of its missile left. Of course, that's to be seen if that's true or not. But how long can Iran take this war forward? How long can it survive with its missile stockpile, according to you?
And as you mentioned, that they've already exuded the ability to absorb strikes and still continue. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I think it's less about, for Iran, it's less about how many missiles they have left and more about the oil. And by that, I mean, so there's certain factors that have to go with, because everything for Iran is strategically premised on their economic dimension. Their economic dimension is tethered to the production and the export of oil. So there are certain factors about, if you can't get the oil out, then things start to back up in the oil wells, and you can only store so much once your storage capacity is fulfilled, and then water starts to seep into the wells and so forth. So there's technical matters that kind of put a timeline on the Iranians for oil export. Otherwise, they're facing a decade of damaged oil export capacity. So that's a strategic issue of the first order. So they can say, we'll win this war, we'll fight the next war, we'll fight again in 3 years, 5 years. But if you cripple your oil industry from the Iranian perspective, then that puts a real pressure on the regime. So I think the timeline there has to do with when, Trump's calculus is how much does a gallon of petrol cost in the United States, and how close do we get to the elections. That's in competition with the Iranian looking at the baseline of their oil fixtures and their oil reservoirs, and when the water starts to seep in. I can't predict that precisely, but I think the pressure is going to come on the Iranians in the next 2 months, And I don't know if Trump's got a month or 2 months or 3 months before he starts to pay too big a political price. We're going to have to watch that time race, but those are the kind of the principles that will guide the decision.
I see your points. There's pressure and mounting pressure on both sides. Colonel Rich Outson, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Good to be with you.